I'm Charles Wilson, Staff Product Cybersecurity Architect at Torque Robotics. This presentation will cover the dynamic analysis settings establishment activity. This diagram shows the overall AVCDL training path. If you're taking this training, it's assumed that you've already completed the AVCDL overview training, and additionally, that you've completed the requirements taxonomy, security requirements, secure design principles, apply secure design, threat prioritization, secure settings, secure coding, and dynamic analysis overview trainings. This training will cover dynamic analysis settings establishment. Before getting into settings establishment, let's briefly review where it fits in the overall dynamic analysis process. Here's the dynamic analysis process, which we previously covered in the dynamic analysis overview training. Our focus for this training will be on the first activity, that of settings establishment. Within the settings establishment activity, the development, security, and DevOps SMEs take the tool documentation, element documentation, and build file and establish a set of element-specific settings, creating an updated build file and generating a security options qualification report. Now, if this diagram seems really information dense, that's because this is an encapsulation of the secure settings process. Let's revisit that process. The secure settings process is comprised of 4 activities. These are identifying options relevant to security, categorizing these options, selecting which ones are to be used for each element, and finally, applying those options to the build system for that element. Now let's briefly review the materials that provide both documentation and training for how the secure settings activities should be undertaken. First, we have the Secure Settings Overview training video, which complements the Secure Settings document secondary document and provides an overview of the secure settings process described in the AVCDL primary document. The Secure Settings Identify Options training goes along with the Secure Settings Identify Options procedure. It works its way through an example using GCC as a basis, covering how one would take a tool and extract the various options from it. The Secure Settings Categorize Options training goes along with the Secure Settings Categorize Options procedure. It extends the example from the Identify Options training and covers how one might create severity categories and categorize the identified options so that they can be processed later. The Secure Settings Select Options training goes along with the Secure Settings Select Options procedure. It continues extending the example from the previous training and addresses how options are selected for application to a specific element of the system by the cybersecurity and development SMEs. Finally, the Secure Settings Apply Options training goes along with the Secure Settings Apply Options procedure. The focus here is on the DevOps SME tasked with taking the options selected for application to a particular element and making the adjustments to the build system to integrate those options. Since the secure settings process activities speak in general, let's talk about the specific things we need to consider when establishing the dynamic analysis settings. Outside of the typical "this is cybersecurity relevant" question when dealing with particular tools and settings, there are 2 considerations that we make when we're establishing the settings to be attached to a particular system element subject to dynamic analysis. This is because dynamic analysis is part of a test suite which is executed. And so, we need to consider the execution time impact, and that's because the build process may be time-bounded. Since dynamic analysis, by its very nature, puts stress on the code, its execution may well exceed any time bounding that's been established for the build process. This needs to be evaluated before we recommend an option or tool for use with a particular element. The second is very much akin to the first, and that is a consideration of the footprint. This may be the overall code size impact, which is of concern when dealing with embedded systems. You have hard limits here, unlike when working with a desktop or server class machine. Beyond the footprint of the code, you have the data memory footprint. Are we able to fit all of the necessary data into memory to be able to execute it efficiently and effectively? Keep in mind that in real-time systems, if you're dealing with operating systems that have virtual paging systems in them, you have to take into consideration that the memory footprint is going to have an adverse effect on the execution time if you're thrashing memory because of it. That covers dynamic analysis settings establishment. Let's look at a summary. When implementing the settings establishment for dynamic analysis tools, we follow the simple steps of selecting the tool's options, scoping the options to the element, updating the build, and, of course, reporting our settings. Keep in mind that when you're going through this exercise, that you're doing so from the cybersecurity perspective and not the general dynamic analysis perspective, because although this is part of the test suite, not every test is cybersecurity relevant. For additional information and to get a more in-depth set of references, the Dynamic Analysis Established Settings Procedure tertiary document is available in the AVCDL GitHub repository. All AVCDL material, both in source and distribution forms, are available on our GitHub site, as shown here. Because of the size of the repository, it's recommended that you either clone the repository or download a zip archive of it if you're not familiar with using Git. Instructions for downloading a zip archive are linked to on the repository's front page. Videos covering various aspects of the AVCDL are available on our YouTube channel, as shown here. It's important to note that all AVCDL materials, except for the introductory blog posts, are intended for product cybersecurity engineering practitioners. With this training complete, if you've completed the other trainings covering the dynamic analysis process activities, you can proceed to the other trainings at this level. These include static analysis, fuzz testing, and secure code review. Here are the references to the source material used in the creation of this presentation. They'll also be included in the video description. Additionally, this presentation's source material will be provided on the AVCDL GitHub repository.